empathetic. Is that right? Empathic. No.
Empathic and empathetic, I think, are different words.
Oh, okay.
Empathetic is the one you're going for. Welcome back to Sweden.
Thank you. Big thanks to Temma for filling in last episode with an excellent show. I enjoyed it very much, especially the start, which I listened to about 15 times because it was hilarious. I think I commented to you that one very peculiar thing that I noticed was that it was kind of like listening to you talk to yourself.
Right.
I think obviously because you guys have, how long have you known each other?
I worked it out because we met when we were 11 and I'm now 33. So literally 2/3 of our lives.
Yeah. It kind of shows, like you the way that you talk is very, very not the pronunciation, but just sort of the manner of speaking is very similar, and clearly the sense of humor as well. So it was interesting.
Was it a bit weird to be listening to somebody else, sort of in your position, as it were? Or?
No, it wasn't weird, but it did sort of give me a nice simulation of what it is like to be a listener of Station 13, and it was a good feeling.
Good. I have a little bit of follow-up from that episode.
Yeah.
Just on a couple of the topics. The Evergreen Vim topic, which I promised I'd never talk about.
Evergreen.
This is the 3rd episode in a row.
Evergreen.
I mentioned that I'd made a blog post about viewing Git graphs in Vim. I posted that on the Vim subreddit, and somebody pointed me to gv.vim, which is a plugin that does more or less the same thing as my blog post was doing, but in a much more sort of nice, usable way. So that's better. So if you went and jumped on my blog post last week and did that, delete all that and install this plugin instead. I'll put a link in the show notes.
Okay.
And then at the end of last episode, we did say we were going to begin a game of Correspondence Go, Temma and I, and we did. Oh. So that game has been going on since then.
Excellent.
And obviously he's wiping the floor with me, but it's been enjoyable.
Great.
As well as that, I actually took in my Go board to work and I set it up on like a free table in the middle of the hallway and just laid a single stone down on there and then went home. And when I went back in, somebody had laid a stone in response.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't like it wasn't a randomly placed thing. It was clearly somebody who at the very least knows sort of the rules and a vague idea about how to play Go.
Wow.
So then I went and laid another stone and went and got a coffee. And when I got back, another stone had been placed. Been going back and forth like this for a couple of days now. I think we're about 8 or 9 moves in.
So you work in an office with quite a large number of people, I believe, but do you know who it is?
No. Well, okay, so I didn't know who it was for the first 6 moves. Then, because where I left it is not that far from where my desk is, so I can see it. So finally, on like the 7th move, I actually saw him go and place a stone. So I have seen who it is now, but I don't know them. I've never met them.
Oh, okay. Does he know... Okay, so you never met... So he probably doesn't know that it's you on the other end.
Probably not.
Ah, that's great.
Unless... I was looking around, I found a mailing list for people who are into board games and that. So I did send an email around asking if anybody's interested in Go. And so if he's on that mailing list, then maybe he could guess that it was me. But yes, it's quite interesting. We're sort of having this vaguely maybe 2 or 3 moves a day correspondence game going on.
That's fantastic. What a great idea. It's a really, must be kind of exciting to sort of creep out there and say, oh, there's another new move.
Yeah, it's really fun. And then a couple of moves ago, turned out I made what I now think was a bad move, because the move that he responded with, I immediately realized was the move I should have made the previous turn. And it was right at the end of the day. So rather than reply straight away, I went home, and I've been keeping track of the game on the SmartGo Kifu app, which I mentioned on the last episode. And the cool thing about this app is it allows you to explore alternatives, and it'll build out like a tree of moves.
Oh, wow.
So I started with the current position of the board, and I just went and played through a few different ideas of where I might play and how he might respond. And the next morning when I went in, I had this whole sort of tree of different alternatives that I'd explored, and I could go and look through them all and decide which one to play. So it's good fun.
That's interesting. Wouldn't that be sort of like a form of cheating because, just hold on, wait a minute, before you say no, just hear me out. Because, like, one of the challenges of board games, especially strategic board games such as Go and of course, like chess, is the ability to play through those kinds of alternatives in your mind and sort of follow them through and sort of think, okay, if he does that, then this, if he does that, then this, and if he does that, then this, and then, of course, to keep those various pathways in your mind as you're actually playing, especially if you're sitting across the table from your opponent.
Right.
To have those things in your mind and to sort of basically work through them quickly so that you don't take too long in making your move, in predicting what they're going to do and then what you should do next and all that kind of stuff.
Right. So, and when you see the same shapes a lot, patterns begin to form and you can start to skip some of those sort of manual.
So, I mean, one of the reasons that I really, really, really suck at board games is because I have a very poor ability to do that. I can't really sort of, I can think one line of thought in my mind, like, okay, if my opponent does this, then I'll do that, and then that will cause this, which will do that. But multiple ones, okay, maybe they won't do that, but if my opponent does this, then I'll do that, then I'll do this. Like, by that stage, I've already forgotten what my first strategy was in my mind.
Yeah.
So, bearing in mind then that ability to predict outcomes and to make judgments based on sort of these predictions and assumptions about what your opponent's going to do, if that is an important skill for playing a board game well, and you have an app that does that for you,
that helps you to do that,
sort of,
yeah,
right? Isn't that kind of cheating?
So I would say that Correspondence Go and Correspondence Chess and the Correspondence version of all these games is a different game to sitting together and playing it. The rules are the same, but I think that's a totally reasonable thing to do in a correspondence game. I think that is the thing that Correspondence Play affords you is time to go through that process and do it slowly.
Yeah, that's true.
And the reason why I think it's quite a good thing is because this is how you exercise those muscles so that you can become good at doing it in real time when you're playing a real game.
Right, I see. Yeah, that makes sense. Like if you were playing a correspondence chess, like the old days where you send postcards to each other where it says like, I don't know,
right.
It was like B3 to 7-4 queen takes whatever,
Right. And the expectation would be that both players have a board set up and they're trying out different things before they decide their move.
So I guess in that case, there's nothing stopping either player from having a notebook and just writing down those alternatives, which is the same thing that your app is doing for you, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
It just makes it a bit easier. So I think it's completely reasonable. I don't think my opponent is doing it. So in that sense, perhaps I have an unfair advantage. But, this is just for a bit of fun. And I think by doing it, perhaps I'll get an advantage over him. Maybe that's not fair, but that's not why I'm doing it. The reason I'm doing it is because I want to improve at the game myself. And by actually going through this process and thinking through all these alternatives and trying to find the best one, I am exercising those muscles and I am giving myself that practice.
Right. Fair enough.
So, how was Boston? We actually got a tweet from friend of the show and host of 2-Bit Geeks, Tom, who was saying that he was keen to hear all about your experiences in Boston because he's from Boston originally and he had been seeing all your tweets showing all the architecture and and all of that, and he was very happy to see all that. So he was interested to hear about your impressions of Boston.
Okay, well, it was very good. This is actually the second time that I've been to Boston, and I will freely admit the first time I went to Boston, which was in 2006, I think, or 2007. So roughly 10 years ago. I will freely admit I didn't really take to it that much. Often when you visit a place for a very short amount of time, a week or a few days, your impression of it is going to be sort of unfairly shaped around single encounters with certain people or the weather or, things that you don't really have any control of. You could be raining the whole time and you could just happen to meet some particularly grouchy people and then all of a sudden you think that entire city and everything in it just is horrible. So my first experience in Boston wasn't that bad, but I just didn't really feel there was much there that was appealing somehow. I guess the people were, the first time around, a little bit, I don't know, standoffish. No one felt particularly friendly or warm or that I could identify with, and it was kind of cloudy the whole time, and the architecture was, okay, nothing really sort of stood out to me that much. So that was 10 years ago. This time, there's a few things that are different. Number one, I was there by myself. So I kind of, when I wasn't engaged in my work responsibilities, I sort of had the freedom to wander around and to look at things myself and just to take my time to do things that I wanted to do. Second thing is the location that I was in was very different. I was staying in a hotel in the financial district, which is a little bit of a walk from the Boston Chinatown. And basically walking through an area called the Seaport District every day to get to the convention center where the event was that I went to attend. And the Seaport District is very new. So basically, I think it's been, when I went there 10 years ago, it probably was completely under construction. It was a large-scale sort of urban improvement program called the Big Dig in Boston, which has been happening over those 10 years. And so this time, the areas where I was spending most of my time during the week that I was there were very, very new, very sort of clean and modern and recently built.
All right.
The people I dealt with this time, interestingly, the first time, people, well, it was a very short trip, so I was really just dealing with restaurant people or shop people the first time I went there. This time, I was exhibiting the game that we've been making, which I'll talk about later, at an event that was run by Oculus. And the local people that I was sort of with the whole time were basically local people who were there hired to be assistants at the different booths that were around the area where we was playing the game. So as a result, they were, young people with various interesting backgrounds, mostly from the local area, from Boston. And as we're standing up the whole time at the event, it's a kind of a interesting bonding experience because everybody's legs are kind of getting tired. I mean, these people are professionals because this is what they get paid to do, to stand up at booths and to help people play the games. But for me, just to sort of have basically 2 days standing up from 9 a.m. until about 6 p.m. all day with the same group of people from Boston, that's a pretty great way to experience the local color and the local character. And so various recommendations from those people during the time that I had, walking around to various different places that I wouldn't have normally gone, enjoying some of the food in Chinatown, which was nice. Just sort of different things like that. It was really enjoyable. And I found that Boston people are almost refreshingly candid. They're very direct.
I've sort of found that as well. I've got a few friends and coworkers from Boston, and I found simultaneously that they are very sort of honest and candid and direct in a way that is especially refreshing now that I live in California.
That's where everybody, for those listeners who aren't familiar with United States domestic kind of character, I think the East Coast people always complain about the West Coast people being, quote, fake.
Right.
So that's what you mean by that.
Yes, obviously an English person coming from Japan and then to California, I'm kind of used to being polite to each other, but the thing is, these friends of mine from Boston, they are all direct and honest, but they're also all really nice and very polite, like unusually good manners in my experience.
Yeah, that is interesting. I noticed that too. I'd also noticed that in New York when I visited New York many years ago. But the sort of good manners, good etiquette, being polite to people, being considerate, and maybe not so much friendly, but just very polite and very, just good manners, basically.
Right.
I felt that very strongly this time in Boston as well. The accent in Boston is very unique in the United States and very, very familiar because, so the Australian accent, we say, for example, car and park and yard.
Right.
I think most listeners who are American can probably see where I'm going with that, but there's a famous thing that people always imitate people from Boston saying, which is you park your car in Harvard Yard.
Right.
which sounds almost identical to the way we would say it in Australia: park your car in Harvard Yard.
Right.
So hearing that accent around me was really kind of familiar, and I think there's a few local people that were booth attendants who said, "Oh, Alex, I love your accent. I could listen to you talk all day." All right, okay. That's the first time anybody's ever complimented me on my accent, because I think I mentioned before that I think the Australian accent is sort of one of the more clumsy, sort of more or less useless accents in the spectrum of English pronunciation. But anyway, yeah. So the people were very good. I didn't. The food was okay, not super fantastic. The Chinatown food was very good, depending on where I went. I once again was completely perplexed by the whole culture of tipping, which we've talked about before.
Nightmare.
Where you just just like some of these shops are so modernized that you go in to pay with your credit card and you're doing it on an iPad, which is run by it was like Square or Toast or one of these kinds of apps that takes care of that. And it's like a button there for you, like choose your tip amount, 25%, 20%, 15%.
Right.
And it's like, well, when we get to this stage, why not just charge a little bit more and give everybody more salary? But anyway,
well,
I'm sure I know there's reasons.
I mean, I think the key is that you can choose your tip amount, right? Yes, the options presented to you are typically 15, 20, and 25, or no tip.
But wouldn't you rather have somebody be nice to you in a shop because they care about you and they are proud of what they're doing, rather than because they want more money from you? Oh, I think we've talked about tipping before, and I think I mentioned that before, so we won't go into that. But anyway, what else? So the architecture, interesting. Some of the buildings in the financial district are it's sort of bizarrely diverse. You've got old buildings from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and then you've got this weird-looking kind of shiny glass things from the 80s, and you've got really modern buildings from the 90s and beyond, and they're all kind of mashed together in this weird kind of what's the opposite of geometric? Non-geometric, ageometric, anti-geometric.
I don't know how you can be non-geometric. I mean, if geometry is shape, what is the lack of geometry?
I guess it's
amorphism.
I suppose. Yeah, you're right. That's a good point. I guess they basically look just sort of randomly placed down at any angle, at any kind of shape, just sort of plopped down on these sort of unusual shaped blocks. So when you stand below them, looking at them from a distance, it looks really weird. It's like this clump of buildings just sort of sprouting out like a clump of grass growing out of growing out of the holes between the bricks or something. It's very, very, very surreal. Actually, one of the tweets that I made twice was that a lot of the architecture there seemed like my own amateur attempts at 3D modeling, because it just sort of like these primitive cubes and shapes just sort of dropped in on top of each other to make this sort of very simplistic looking, unusual architectural shape.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of sort of brutalist style up there, isn't there?
Yeah, brutalist is a good word. Yeah, and I think the mixture of the different kind of architecture, there's brutalist, but there's also stuff that clearly has more of a more traditional heritage as well, and it's all just kind of packed in together into a small space. So that was interesting. What else? As for the event itself, yes, it was very good.
So you were obviously PAX East was on. Was your event, was that part of PAX East, or was that another event that was running alongside it, or what was the story there?
Yeah, so all of the above. It was another event running alongside PAX East, which was specifically run by Oculus to show off new games coming out on the Oculus Rift.
I see. So it was in like a separate venue. Did people need separate tickets, or did their PAX East tickets get them in, or how did that work?
I believe that actually this was a invitation-only event for press and media only.
Oh, really? Oh, so you didn't have to deal with punters, as it were?
Punters, no. So, yeah, there were no people coming through the event space that were, just sort of regular players. Most people were like YouTubers or blog writers or people from, other media and other, like a guy from the Boston Herald was there.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so it was, from the point of view of an exhibitor, it was good because, everybody that you spoke to is highly significant as far as it sounds a bit cold to say it this way, but the benefit that they could provide for you actually being there. That is that, you show them the game, and if they enjoy it, then hopefully they will feel inspired to write about it.
Right.
And that could help you with getting more exposure out there.
Right.
So that was the good thing, but of course the negative thing is that when you show games to general players and consumers, the reaction is generally much more passionate.
Right.
And the reaction from media always tends to be very kind of soft,
Right.
It's like, yeah, this is it's really good. Yeah, thanks very much for the demo. Thanks very much. Yeah, and we'll be back in touch, and then that's it.
I mean, it's literally their job. So,
right.
The gamers and players that are coming to see the game, they're coming because they really like games, and they want to sort of experience the latest thing, and they're probably using up their weekend to do it. But
that's right.
Yeah.
So regular players obviously are going to be much more passionate and vocal, and if they like it, they're going to tell you that they really like it, and if they don't like it, then they'll tell you that too. So that was the negative side, I suppose. One really good thing that I must mention was that the event space that Oculus had for this event that I participated in was fantastic.
Oh, yeah?
It was not so good because it was a little bit far away from the area, like the main convention area where PAX East was being held, which was a little bit of a unnecessary detriment for the media who were invited to come because they had to make this trek all the way down there.
Right.
I believe there was a shuttle bus that was operating, but anyway. The positive of it, though, was that the event space was amazing. So it was in the Innovation and Design Center in the Seaport District in Boston. It was on the top floor. And they'd rented out the whole space of this sort of large event space on the top floor with these big windows and a high ceiling, and being on the top floor with not many buildings around it on the edge of this sort of seaport district. Through the whole time we were there's just this beautiful natural light coming straight through the whole space. And because it's VR, you can do that.
Right, you don't have to worry about it shining on the monitors.
Exactly. So for those who don't know, generally game conventions, they'll be extremely dark. And, basically you have like these sort of downlights illuminating spaces in this very, very dark hall. Obviously, because the darker it is, the more contrast there'll be on the monitors and the games look better. However, when you're dealing with VR, because people are wearing, HMD head-mounted displays, you don't need to worry about light leakage because it's dark in there anyway. So I got to tell you, like when to play a VR game and then to pull off the head-mounted display and have all of this nice natural light, just feels so good. It's kind of like it highlights that contrast between this is the virtual world and now I'm back in the real world.
Interesting.
And it just feels nice.
Yeah, I've never had that experience. And now that I think back to it, I've played plenty of VR games. They were either in the office or they were, at an event like Bit Summit, which is in a very dark hall.
Right.
For all the reasons you described.
Yeah. So it's just like, rather than taking off this mask and then it being all black, except for these really glaring lights, beaming down on you, taking it off and sort of looking out over the Seaport District at this beautiful, horizon with these clouds and the sun coming in, it just felt fantastic. So that was really great. And, as a result, sort of standing there for 2 days was grueling on the legs. However, I'd much rather be standing in a environment like that with this beautiful natural light and this airy feeling rather than a dark, stuffy hole. So that was really good.
Oh, great. And can you tell us anything about your game then? Now it's all been made public?
Yes, I can tell you everything about our game. So I won't make this too long in case listeners aren't particularly interested in VR games, but Vitei Backroom has been working on a game called Paper Valley, and it is a very simple game which is all about throwing paper planes. However, what we've done is a fellow developer who played our game at the event described it as a meditation on a single game mechanic. And that is a perfect description. And I know that our lead programmer was he was extremely happy to have that description of the game because that's been our goal the whole time with this. That basically, we wanted it to be very focused on a single thing that you do that feels really good. And it started off basically with the aforementioned lead programmer developing a very simple prototype, which was just about throwing paper planes, but just felt really good. And immediately we latched onto the idea that, paper planes are very good because you can just pick, everybody knows what it is, and you pick it up, you hold it, everybody knows how to use it and how to actually throw it. That motion of throwing a paper plane is something that, most people will understand intuitively.
Right. And for those who've never used a VR device, that idea fits quite well with VR because the controller that you use is not like a traditional games controller, but an individual kind of control unit in each hand, and you can move your actual hand and throw it, right?
That's right, yeah. So we basically built the whole game around this single simple action of throwing a paper plane. And I won't spoil anything for people out there who are interested in VR games, but essentially the idea of the game is that by using these paper planes, you are rejuvenating this barren land that has been made very, very sick and wasted by a kind of blight, like a plant disease. And basically it's a fantasy world, and you go through rejuvenating the world gradually by using these paper planes. We came across that idea simply because, there was a moment when the paper plane missed and it hit the ground, and we thought, well, what should happen there?
Right.
Well, how about a plant grows because it's paper?
Oh, I see.
Okay, so if you miss and a plant grows, what happens when you hit? Well, how about, the whole area becomes lush with green? Well, if it's going to become lush with green, that therefore implies that it was not green to begin with.
Right, yeah.
And why is that?
It's a lovely, lovely sort of image. I think you've released a trailer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I was watching that, and just to see all the sort of the color burst out.
Right.
It's a really nice sort of visual style it's got going for it, I think.
But the last thing to say about the game itself is that there's also a deeper, more philosophical side to it too. It indirectly deals with ideas of rejuvenation and sacrifice and health and sickness, and an idea that these things are intertwined, and you can't really have sickness without health, as you can't have health without sickness. Just this idea of so we don't we very much admire the work of a certain game company called That Game Company, which is an excellent name. One of the things that game company does very, very well is that they never really force their storyline too heavily onto the player.
Right.
If you want to enjoy the storyline, it's there for you. But if you don't want to and you just want to play it as a fun arcade game, you can do that too. And that's one of the things that we aspired to achieve with this game as well. We're kind of using the benefit that storytelling in VR is very, very complicated, because it's, the standard tools, the commonly found tools for storytelling in games, such as, text that you read, or cutscenes, which are, that's a term for basically like a small snippet of a game that plays out more or less like a movie that you just watch.
Right. And very often you'll sort of be taken out of your character to some extent, taken out of control, so you can kind of get this almost overhead narrative view.
That's right.
Of the scene for the length of that cutscene, and then you sort of jump back in.
Right. So all of these things are more or less, I wouldn't say impossible, but they're not really recommendable in a VR game.
Right.
To have like a lot of text that you've got to read. Reading text in VR is not that comfortable. And the other thing is a cutscene where you are suddenly not in control of what you're looking at.
Oh, yeah.
That can also result in, just not very comfortable feeling. So we're sort of taking advantage of the fact that storytelling in VR is complicated. So we've basically taken the approach of having this narrative there if you want to enjoy it. But if you just want to enjoy throwing paper planes at targets, you can do that too.
Cool.
Yeah. So one last thing to just say, probably one of the most precious moments of this event was having Paper Valley, having our demo played by three people, probably in their late 60s.
Oh, wow.
Or early 70s. And these people were brought along by invitees, like visitors to the event space. And they were very nervous, and they would say, "No, I've never really played games like the last game I played was Pong." and I'd sort of give them a very approving nod, because that's that's important history right there.
Right.
But, they'd say, I don't really play VR games at all, and I'm kind of nervous about this whole VR thing, but my son said I should give it a try, so, And I'm happy to say that the real touching moment was just seeing our game become so easy for people who had never tried VR before and who'd never really played games that much before. And the reason was interesting. It was because they interacted with the game like it was real.
Right.
Not like it's some game mechanic where you grab it with a trigger.
They weren't sort of searching for the mechanic. And I think that is a sort of thing that we do subconsciously. People who've played games their whole lives is immediately try and figure out how it works under the hood and how we can take advantage of that. Right?
Exactly.
Like with Wii Tennis, everyone immediately realized that you can just sit down on your sofa and flick your wrist.
Right.
And it's the same as doing a wild swing with the Wii remote.
Right. So, yeah, these people would basically throw these paper planes like they were actually real paper planes. And that's, of course, how we design it, so that they feel like real paper planes. And so compared to some of the more experienced VR media people who play VR games all day, every day that they're working, these people got the whole mechanics of throwing and hitting targets relatively quickly, and it was just really impressive to see. And then, of course, once the demo finishes, it was about 10, 15 minutes long, they would, we'd help them take the head-mounted display off, and basically, they would spend the next 15, 20 minutes telling me about their what they thought of the experience, and hearing that from somebody who's not only not a game consumer, also not only not somebody who's never really had much experience in VR before, but somebody with that kind of life experience and that kind of appreciation of subtlety and all the things that come with advanced age, appreciation of artistic beauty and subtlety, and also an eagerness to understand, well, what was involved in making this? How did you come up with this? How does it work? All of that, like spending the next sort of 20 minutes talking to these people about these kinds of questions and their reactions and feelings was just really precious. So, yeah, that was probably the best moment of the event for me.
Awesome. So when is this game coming out?
It is coming out on the 19th. So I think when our podcast goes out, it will already be out.
It'll already be out. Oh, I see. Yeah, because we're recording this a little bit early because I'm going to be away.
Right.
So by the time this podcast is out, it'll already be out. Yep. Obviously, everyone will listen to this and immediately want to rush out and buy it.
Obviously.
So where can they go? What can they do?
Yeah, so it is an Oculus Rift game. It is exclusive on the Oculus Rift. We are... if things go well in future, it will be great to have the opportunity to consider other platforms as well. But for the moment, it is exclusive on Oculus Rift, which means if you have an Oculus Rift, you can get it on the Oculus Store, which you use the Oculus Store app to access, obviously.
Right.
And if you don't have an Oculus Rift, then you should get one.
Right. Very good. Oh, cool. Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to playing it for sure. Oh, and how much does it cost? We should probably mention that as well.
Yeah, it's going to cost $19.99 in the States. $19.99, that is. Not $1,999.
Right.
Although you're free to pay that much for it if you really want. Yes, $19.99.
And it's a worldwide release, though, right?
Yes, that's right. So
yeah,
it's a worldwide release, but yes, $19.99. So please,
$19.99, April 19th. 19's all round.
Don't forget the 20% tip.
I don't know if the Oculus Store has tipping.
Yeah, so that's that.
Cool.
Now, I wanted to just check in with you about some movies, because I watched 4 movies on the way to Boston.
Ah, yes. You said you were looking forward to watching something on the flight.
Yes. I'll just run over the movies that I watched, and then I want to know if you've seen any of these and if we can have a little bit of a chat about these.
Okay.
So the 4 movies that I watched, I'll list them in reverse order. I watched Atomic Blonde, which is basically an action movie.
Yep.
I watched Downsizing.
Not familiar with that one.
Okay, that is it's a science fiction movie essentially, but it's like it's an kind of like a human drama / science fiction movie. I watched Straight Outta Compton, which is like a documentary style movie all about hip hop culture and NWA in the United States. And I watched Blade Runner 2049.
Aha.
So,
which we all know what that is.
Yes. Have you seen any of these?
So, well, I've seen Blade Runner 2049, and that's it. I really wanted to see Atomic Blonde when it was at the cinema, but I missed it, so I haven't seen that, and I haven't seen either of the others either.
Okay.
So,
yeah, let's talk about Blade Runner for a bit, but I just wanted to mention Downsizing. So Downsizing stars Matt Damon, and it's very good. It's actually listed, I just typed Downsizing into DuckDuckGo, and it's actually listed as a comedy from this year.
okay.
I don't know that I would class it as a comedy. I would class it in this rare and excellent, very, very precious to me genre of science fiction movies that are not action movies.
Ah, yes.
So there's no action in it, but it is essentially a science fiction movie. And, just like 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is there's action in that, but it's definitely not an action movie.
Right. I think we spoke about that once before.
Yeah. I'm all for, expansion of the whole genre of science fiction to include things that aren't always about explosions and lasers and spaceships and stuff like that. But yeah, so I can recommend it. Downsizing. I mean, it wasn't super fantastic, but Matt Damon's performance, as usual, Matt Damon's an excellent actor, and his performance was excellent as usual. So can definitely recommend it. Now, Blade Runner. What did you think? Well, I guess we can probably do this without spoiling it.
We can. Well, let's see. Okay, we'll put chapter markers in there. So anybody who hasn't seen it, who wants to be sensitive about spoilers, skip this chapter, or possibly even skip to the end, because
Right.
I don't know if we're going to talk about anything after this. And we'll see if it sounds like we're getting into spoiler territory. We'll give you a warning as well. So in case you're not super sensitive and you think, oh, it's probably safe to listen, and then if we veer into dangerous territory, we'll give you a heads up. Okay, so let's go. Blade Runner, what did you think? What do you think of the soundtrack, first of all? Let's get that out of the way.
Okay. Yes, Blade Runner, firstly the soundtrack. I mean, unfortunately, I was listening on an airplane.
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah.
So,
That's a shame.
yeah, I had those earbud style, the ones that kind of block out a bit of the noise around you style headphones on the British Airways flight I was on. So, yeah, I didn't get any bass, but I could definitely hear the music.
Right.
I definitely want to see it again. But yes, the music was very good. Very, very good. So it obviously has a big responsibility on it, because the original Blade Runner music by Vangelis,
I'm not sure. I don't know. Yeah, one of those.
yeah, is iconic in the history of synthesized music. And the music for this new movie was very, very good at giving enough hints of the original, those things that you kind of want to hear in a Blade Runner movie,
Right.
but also with a strong character of its own, basically.
Right. No, it was Hans Zimmer, wasn't it, who did the music this time?
Yes, that's right. Hans Zimmer and Benjamin Wallfish, who I don't know, but he's British and he's a conductor and pianist. He's done a few other movies before, but this probably is his most notable recent production, together with the very famous Mr. Zimmer.
Right.
Yes, so I was very, very happy that it didn't just kind of, play off all the old themes of those big super saw brass
Right.
Yamaha CS80 synths from the original one. But it had that, but it definitely had its own character, which was really great. Now, there's not too much that I want to say about the movie, so we probably don't have to worry about spoiling it. But what I do want to say is that I thought it was really, really good. Especially the acting. Like Ryan Gosling, who plays the protagonist in this movie,
Yeah.
was extremely good. And I have to admit, when I first, knowing the original Blade Runner, which is sort of this dark, cyberpunk-esque William Gibson style, kind of dirty, rainy, very gritty depiction of the future. When I first saw, I intentionally didn't watch any previews of it, so I had no idea what it was going to look like. But I had seen posters and pictures.
Right.
And when I first saw Ryan Gosling, I thought, no, he just looks too soft.
Right.
Right. He doesn't have that kind of gritty, edgy, dirty kind of look that Harrison Ford did in the original.
Right. It's a bit clean.
Yeah, very clean and very, just very, very soft. And I just didn't think it was a good fit at all for the movie. After watching it, like his performance, I felt was just exceptionally good at sort of capturing I'm not worried. I suppose we can spoil a few things, but basically capturing the subtlety and the kind of artificiality, I suppose, of his character. That's as much as I'll say about that. But
Right.
it's capturing that sort of clinical artificiality and a very suspicious softness.
Yeah.
He did that just fantastically well, and just like even on aeroplane on a tiny little screen in front of me, I was just watching it, just sort of grinning the whole time and thinking, man, this guy is doing an amazing job, at just getting that kind of uncomfortable, soft, suspicious softness that he did for the movie in a clinical kind of way, but very also kind of believable and sort of identifiable. You can sort of relate to what he's feeling, even though it's very intentionally kind of artificial. So, yeah, I just thought it was just fantastic.
What did you think of his virtual girlfriend?
Good. Yeah, I'm very, very beautiful. I'm not sure that's what your question was.
Not what I'm getting at, but yes, I suppose she would be.
Yeah.
That's how they would market them.
Yeah, that's right. But yeah, no, all of the performances I felt were just excellent. The casting was spot on. Like everybody,
Right. I actually meant less the actress and more just the concept, right? This idea that he has this sort of virtual, non-physical, right? Like hologrammatic girlfriend is kind of a new thing to this installation in the series.
Right. I mean, we talked about my feelings about science fiction movies back when we did our Star Wars, The Last Jedi episode. But I tend to go into science fiction movies with a very, very uncynical, open mind.
Right.
And I like to just let it all wash over me and, kind of fall into the whole immersion of what it is. And so I actually thought that, like the idea of a holographic partner was a great extension from the things that were shown in the first movie. When you extrapolate, then what's going to happen down the line from that world? The idea that you could purchase for yourself a holographic projection, which is obviously has artificial intelligence and has a personality and can give you companionship, even though it's just light. Yeah, I thought that was a really interesting and enjoyable extension from what could be plausible from the first movie's world. What did you think?
I thought it was an interesting idea. It's obviously got echoes in a couple of other films that have come out recently, like Her and I guess to some extent Ex Machina, but that's a bit different. Ex Machina, by the way, you must see. We should talk about it at some point. I think you would really like it because that's another science fiction movie that is not really an action movie.
Okay.
So you should make the time to see that at some point. But I guess the interesting thing to ask about that concept and that character is a bit difficult to do without spoilers, so I'm not really sure whether we should cover it, but I'll dive in and then we can decide whether to cut it later.
Okay.
How about that?
Okay.
So if we don't cut it, then we're getting into spoiler territory, people, so feel free to skip to the next chapter.
Okay.
Do you think that she loved him in any sense? Like they sort of teased that idea of she had given him this nickname of like, not nickname, but she said he should have a proper name, that he would be called Joe and all of this. But then later he sort of comes across this kind of essentially an advert for this product, and that advert called him Joe as well. So it's sort of the question is, is this just the way it's programmed? Does it always do this? Or was that a real thing that she sort of felt?
Right. I mean, that is in itself a central theme to the whole Blade Runner storyline, is the idea of love between artificial intelligence.
Right. And the ability for artificial intelligence to feel any sort of emotion.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. And so, you ask, do I think that she actually loved him? Well, being that she's artificial intelligence that's sole purpose and programming is designed to provide companionship, then yes, I guess from the point of view of what she's programmed to do.
But what choice did she have?
Right. I mean, obviously, yeah. So, I mean, that you could say, yeah, well, I mean, it's kind of, we now sort of dangerously on the edge of talking about what love actually is. I think she did because, again, as the theme has come up, for example, in the first movie, the relationship between Deckard and Rachel, Rachel being a, what do they call it in the first movie?
A replicant.
Yeah, that's it, replicant.
Yeah.
So therefore artificial, and Deckard obviously not being that.
Probably
that that whole relationship between them, you call that love, but then from her point of view, is that love seeing that she's basically a programmed machine?
Right.
It's the same kind of thing with this holographic character.
Right. I guess there's a bit of a difference because she wasn't programmed to love Deckard. That wasn't her purpose, right? She was programmed for a different purpose and grew to love him, I guess.
Right.
Whereas the entire purpose of this virtual girlfriend character is to be a virtual girlfriend, right?
Right.
So does that make it any less real? Like, is that?
I think it.
What does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think she definitely loves him then to the extent that she's programmed to do so.
Does that love that she was programmed to have become more real as it becomes associated with their history and his personality? Like by the end of their time together, you couldn't have swapped her out for any other random one of these virtual girlfriends, right? Her memories and their experiences together mean something on top of her initial programming, right?
Yeah. And so I think all of this, you get that sense that there was an interesting thing that came into my mind halfway through, actually towards the end. It's like, well, that, seeing that she's essentially a purchasable commodity, you kind of think to yourself, well, he just buys another one. But, that's not that simple because she's got all this stored common experience together with him.
Right. And that got destroyed, right?
Yeah.
Like they made a whole thing. That's why she said, don't put me in the little portable pen drive thing.
Right.
Because it's dangerous.
Right.
Even though it would give her the freedom, right?
Right, exactly. So, I guess all of this indicates that I suppose as far as the kind of love that can be shared between artificial beings, yes.
I mean, I guess in a way, that's possibly an even more interesting question or a more interesting observation is that a replicant would feel the need to buy one of these virtual girlfriends.
That's right, yeah.
They feel something lacking that is that the same as the human feeling of loneliness, or is that an attempt to become more human? Or, what drives that desire?
That is a very fascinating question. I mean, I suppose that the replicant is programmed to be somewhat considerate and caring and sensitive towards the feelings of others. So if the replicant is designed to have a certain degree of that ability, then it doesn't seem too much of a stretch to then say that, well, the replicant could approach themselves that way as well, where they view their own feelings with a certain degree of objectivity or subjectivity, meaning that, that it's not too much, it's not implausible that they could have emotions such as loneliness or the desire to have companionship and to have somebody to share experiences with. I mean, it's interesting that it's very clear when that character is introduced that she's designed for, I guess, not so much companionship but more entertainment, because when he comes back and she's got like the meal ready for him and her attire changes very quickly depending on how she senses he's feeling.
Right. And it's sort of purposefully done in a very 50s style. Like, I think they dress her up at first in this very 50s housewife style of clothes, which is kind of representative in some way of, I mean, there is a bit of a sexist background to all of this, right? There's probably nothing more objectifying of women than creating objects that simulate being a woman.
Right.
But so, they I think they sort of leaned into that by dressing her up in this kind of 50s housewife get-up to kind of give it's that same sort of, nostalgia for that sort of era, and that idea that she really is kind of there to satisfy him. It's not It's not so much of a two-way street, although he does show actual emotion towards her.
Yeah, and there's all of these. I mean, this is the whole central core of, the entire Blade Runner storyline about basically artificial beings feeling things.
Right.
And that's, of course, the very quite legendary ending of the original Blade Runner movie with the Rutger Hauer character.
Right.
There's a classic line, "I've seen things you people wouldn't believe," and all that.
Right.
It's the idea that the termination of artificial life is that immoral because they are programmed to feel things as well and to store experiences and to consider those experiences, and that kind of creates feelings and emotions, and all of this is just, in my mind, evidence why this recent Blade Runner movie is just very, very excellent. Did you enjoy Harrison Ford's appearance in the movie?
I did, yeah. I thought he was pretty good. Appropriate, it's set far enough in the future. He has aged,
right,
as one would. And yeah, I thought it was good. And they didn't... I came away thinking... I think I heard some other people saying that they explicitly tossed away any notion that, in the original film, in the director's cut of the original Blade Runner, not the theatrical release. There were sort of extra scenes added in, like the unicorn dream and stuff, that pushed the idea more that Deckard might be a replicant. And, there's certain cuts of the film are very much on the side of, yes, he is a replicant, and there are others that leave it a bit more ambiguous, and others which don't really imply it at all. And from what I gather, I'm not, as with Star Wars, I'm not actually, super into Blade Runner. I've seen it a few times, but I'm not like a massive fan. I haven't read a lot of the theories about it. But from what I gather, the big Blade Runner fans hate the idea that Deckard is a replicant.
Oh, okay.
They think it's stupid, right?
Right.
And that kind of ruins the whole movie for them. So
right.
that seems to be like a sort of long-running controversy. And I think I've heard people say that this movie states that he isn't, but I'm not sure if I took that away from it. I felt like it was still ambiguous in my mind. Did you pick up on any of that? Or?
Yeah, I agree. The same as you. Like, I don't think...
I thought they quite skillfully sort of walked that path of leaving it ambiguous, because I think I suspect that they were on the side that he's not a replicant, but I think they managed to make it such that the film would make sense either way.
Right. And that's, I think the beauty of this film, again, is that there's so much subtlety. And, that's reflected in the music, it's reflected in the acting, it's reflected in a lot of these complicated concepts that the story kind of spins out of the original core ideas of the first Blade Runner movie. So much subtlety. Compare it to, say, Force Awakens, Star Wars Episode 7. And, that's not subtle. Like, it's kind of, I mean, of course it's going to be good because it's got all of the things that a Star Wars fan would want to see in a new Star Wars movie.
Right.
A familiar storyline. It's got all the action. It's got the humor. It's got the, everything that you want to see is there. So, of course, it's going to be good.
I mean, Star Wars isn't particularly subtle anyway.
True.
Right? The original Star Wars is not subtle.
Well, I mean, Empire Strikes Back is quite subtle, but that's a conversation for another time. But yes, with Blade Runner, obviously, Blade Runner 2049, it's a brave thing to go into a franchise with this much attention and to treat it very, very carefully and subtly. It could have been easier to... No, actually, I'm going to just rephrase all of that. It probably would have been a braver thing to do it the other way around and to make Blade Runner 2049 a complete rip-off of the first movie.
I don't know if braver is the word. I mean, I think it would definitely have not gone as well. But it would be the obvious thing to do.
That's what I mean, yeah. Obvious thing, but brave, because the difference, of course, is that Blade Runner has much more of an intellectual... a cerebral side to it than, say, Star Wars, which is, as we talked about before, at least in my opinion, space opera.
Right.
This is real kind of thick, meaty, cerebral science fiction, Blade Runner. So therefore, it only fits that a sequel to the original classic movie it also has an equal amounts of this sort of heavy intellectual side that makes you think, what does it mean to be artificial? What does it mean to have feelings? What does it mean to have memory? That's an interesting thing I just thought of as well. That holographic character, the idea that all of her memory, there's a big spoiler here, but all of her memory and all of her sort of common existence together with the Ryan Gosling character, Joe, or Kay, I think,
yes.
All of that is stored in this little thing that he's holding, which projects her, and then that gets ultimately destroyed.
Right.
And then, like, all of her memory, all of that common experience and all of that emotion is lost in an instant.
Yeah.
Like tears in the rain.
Well,
so,
yes.
there's some subtlety for you. Yeah, so interesting. Actually, in that isn't that scene? Isn't that the one where they're on that dam and there's all the water and it's raining?
Which scene? The tears in the rain scene?
No, the scene when she dies. No, it was before that, wasn't it?
No, that's before she. Yeah. It's I can't remember the name of the sort of bad guy character, the woman, the replicant woman who's really strong.
Right, I don't remember.
She stamps on it when they're at the Hollywood place with Harrison Ford and all of that. And she was quite an interesting character as well. I mean, she kind of seemed like the most black and white character in a way. I guess it felt like something sort of broke in her when the blind guy stabbed one of the replicants he'd made, as soon as they were born, in inverted quotes.
Right.
And that kind of felt like a very sudden switch in her. She'd been ruthless before, but that was the moment when she went kind of full on evil or out of control or whatever.
Right.
I don't know if that's supposed to be the case, but that was kind of the way it felt to me.
Yeah. That scene has reminded me of the architecture.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I found the architecture really impressive through the whole movie.
Yeah, it was interesting. An interesting thing about it is not just the architecture, but the lighting and all that. They really played back on the original Blade Runner, right? And they went for a lot of the aesthetic of the original Blade Runner, to the extent of having the same logos come up, like Atari,
right?
Which kind of seems like weirdly dated now. Like in the original Blade Runner, those things were chosen because they were very current and even futuristic for the time,
right?
But now it kind of seemed like a bit of an anachronism to have the Atari logo suddenly show up.
Well, that's interesting because the original Blade Runner is set in the year 2019, which is
next year,
isn't it? And this one obviously is 2049.
Right, 30 years
So we're
later.
talking 30 years later. So, yeah, I suppose probably the choice to go with those logos that they had before, like Atari, I think there's a Sony logo in there too. Which is in the first one, obviously, too.
Right.
That choice is probably based on two things. Number one is that, well, it's 30 years in the future. So, yeah, I suppose, you're going to have a few of those companies still around and still major, probably. The second thing is probably they also did need to include some kind of, you can't really call it Easter egg when it's that big and that obvious, but...
Right. But, yeah, references to the previous sort of fan service, as it were.
Fan service, exactly. So you need to have some...
And it would have been weird if they'd had, current logos. Like, if they'd had the Apple logo and the Google logo and the Facebook logo show up.
Right.
That'd just be really, really bad.
Yeah. Yeah, especially right now, you wouldn't want the Facebook logo coming up right now, would you? By the way, just on that topic, you are joined by, what's his full name? Steve Wozniak.
Oh,
who has also
I vaguely read something about that.
He's the one of the co-founders of Apple, who has also recently very publicly deleted his Facebook account. So,
well, he's actually deleted it. I still haven't. I've deactivated mine, but I haven't actually pulled the trigger on deleting it. Right. I have been off it for I think a month now.
How do you feel? You feeling good?
I feel literally no different. For the first couple of days, I did muscle memory try and go to Facebook on my phone, and then sort of realize it wasn't there, and that was a bit weird.
Right,
like it really does sort of. You notice how much of a habit it's become when you find yourself actually physically trying to do it, even though you know that you've quit. I mean, it's a bit like quitting smoking as well. If you have smoked for some period of time and then you decide to quit, for quite a while after you quit, you keep on sort of trying to get a packet of cigarettes out of your pocket when you're at a bus stop or whatever. Like, just because it's a natural thing to do. And then you realize, oh no, there's no cigarettes in my pocket because I've quit.
Right. I've noticed a difference, actually. And that is that since you've quit Facebook, you post a lot more on Twitter, which I think is great. Because as I've made known before, I quite like Twitter. So I think it's great too. I'm always happy to read stuff from you in Twitter. So now, since you've quit...
I'm surprised that there isn't an actual difference there, because I didn't really post to Facebook all that much. But anyway, I guess if you say it's true, it must be so.
That's right. If Alex says it's true, it must be true. Yeah, okay. So back... Yeah, I mean, just closing up the topic of Blade Runner 2049, I definitely want to see it again with better sound next time. But yeah, my feeling coming off the plane was like, wow, if that movie was that impressive looking on a tiny little screen on a noisy airplane in a kind of a haze of jet-lagged confusion, then I really want to see it just sort of regularly, because I'm sure it's going to be even more impressive.
Yeah. I'll probably be seeing it again soon, because it's out on the Japanese iTunes store now, so we can watch it. I can watch it with my wife, who wanted to watch it, but didn't really want to have to sort of see it through the haze of a foreign language. She wanted to get the full experience of actually understanding. With some films, it doesn't really matter, and you can just sit and enjoy it, even if you don't totally follow it.
Yeah.
But as you say, with a film like this, it's quite a cerebral experience, and you really do want to understand what everyone's saying and be able to sort of consider it and think about the ideas that are coming up. And
Absolutely.
so she wanted to wait for one with subtitles, which we can get now.
Absolutely, yeah, that's a good idea. Subtitles or dubbed. No, this might be a movie that would be more enjoyed.
I mean, she's not into dubs in general. Okay. I think subtitles would be better, because you want to get I think you can get the feeling of the emotion from the acting,
right? I mean,
even if you don't understand the language.
Yeah, true. I mean, the one performance that really, really, I felt was exceptional was Ryan Gosling's performance, and I think that dubbed. Yeah, you obviously risk the dubbing actor not doing as good a job as Ryan.
And Japanese dubs, I mean, they're all going to sound like anime characters.
That's the typical thing, is that a character like Ryan Gosling, who looks like that, doesn't have the actual Ryan Gosling. He doesn't have a terribly deep voice, but usually in the Japanese dubs, they're like really deep and masculine.
Right.
It's like,
like weirdly sort of cartoonishly macho.
Yeah, the advantage of the dub ones generally is that the quality of the actual translation tends to be better, because they can put more into it. Whereas subtitles ones, they're usually strangely brief, because they only have a certain amount of characters they can put onto the screen with a certain amount of time.
Oh, I see. Oh, really? Yeah, I've never really noticed that before. The funniest thing I've seen in Japanese, so I think they do this in both the subtitles, and they might even do this in the dub, which would probably be even funnier, of James Bond. Have you seen James Bond in Japanese?
No, I haven't. It sounds good, though.
You really should. Whenever he talks... it's got to be the modern James Bond with Judi Dench as M.
Right.
Whenever he talks to M, he calls her Mom. Right. Somebody at some point in Japan must have misunderstood this.
Okay.
and so it's translated as Okasa.
Oh no. No, but that's
for the entire, and I guess they just kept going with it now, and it's just what he says. So for all the James Bond movies, he's calling her mum, like his mother.
Right. But that's a tough thing though, because that is very British. Because he's not saying ma'am, he's saying mum, right?
No, he's saying mum, as in madam, with the D missed.
Oh, really?
It's not a.
Wow, I'm shocked.
It's not mum. It's not like your mother. It's a form of address.
Well, there you go. So you can lump me in together with those translators who did that work, because I thought that he's actually saying mum, as in like mother, and I thought, oh, that's very. I actually felt that was like
so weird,
like kind of fascinating that he would call his boss mum, because it's kind of
that would be fascinating. That would say all sorts of very strange and unusual things about the British.
Yeah, because that's wow, I'm shocked. Because, I actually thought he was saying mum. And for some reason, I'm trying to think why that wasn't strange to me.
Did you not? And was it not weird that in the era before Judi Dench, he never called M Daddy?
That would be kind of a bit creepy, wouldn't it?
I think calling her mum is a bit creepy.
I'm trying to think of a reason. There's a reason why when I saw that with the Daniel Craig movies, and I thought it didn't seem strange to me that he would call her mum. And I'm trying to remember why. It might be something from my upbringing where, like, a very important lady in an establishment, kind of like a term of endearment, essentially, but it's kind of like to call her mum, as in mother, as if like she's the mother of a whole bunch of children doing stuff.
Can't say I've ever encountered that in English.
Okay.
I've heard of that in, like, the woman who owns a bar in Japan might be referred to
as okasan,
some kind of bar.
Yeah,
or mama or whatever,
right.
Some sort of. But I've never. I don't think I've ever encountered that.
Well, there you go. Then maybe that's
English. If listeners have ever referred to their superior as mum,
or daddy,
or daddy.
Don't tell us what your job is.
Let us. Yeah, just be very tread carefully.